Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves in this rich body of wisdom that we learn from and we add to. We are in Parshat Kedoshim, which is in the book of Leviticus, starting at chapter 19, verse 1. We'll read through the English translation of our Torah portion. I'll share with you a focused study about it, and then we'll open it up for our collaborative conversation about it. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute at this time, together we can recite the blessing, giving thanks for this moment. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu
the mitzvotav mitzivanu
la'asok
b'divrei Torah.
Thank you, God, for the opportunity this moment to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. Once again, we are in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 1. I'll share with you the opening verses, and then I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the whole Israelite community, and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, Adonai, your God, am holy. You shall each revere his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I, Adonai, am your God. Do not turn to idols, or make molten gods for yourselves. I, Adonai, am your God." Sherry, we want to read a little bit, starting at verse 5.
Thank you, Rabbi. When you sacrifice an offering of well-being to the Lord, sacrifice it so that it may be accepted on your behalf. It shall be eaten on the day you sacrifice it, or it shall be eaten on the day you sacrifice it, or on the day following. But what is left by the third day must be consumed in fire. If it should be eaten on the third day, it is an offensive thing. It will not be acceptable. And he who eats of it shall bear his guilt, for he has profaned what is sacred to the Lord. That person shall be cut off from his kin. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not pick your vineyard bare, or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I, the Lord, am your God.
Oh,
Thank you, Steve.
they had homelessness then.
Yeah.
You shall not steal. You shall not deal deceit or falsely with one another. You shall not swear falsely by my name, profaning the name of your God. I am the Lord. You shall not defraud your fellows. You shall not commit wrong. The wages of a labor shall not remain with you until morning. You should not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord.
Thank you, Steve. And let me invite Anna, would you like to read a little bit, starting at verse 15?
You shall not render an unfair decision. Do not favor the poor or show deference to the rich. Judge your kin fairly. Do not deal basely with members of your people. Do not profit by the blood of your fellow Israelite. I am the Eternal. You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. Reprove your kin, but incur no guilt on their account. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against members of your people. Love your fellow Israelite as yourself. I am the Eternal.
Thank you. Richard, do you want to read a little bit, starting at verse 19?
Yes, Rabbi, thank you. You shall observe my laws. You shall not let your cattle mate with a different kind. You shall not sow your field with two kinds of seed. You shall not put on cloth from a mixture of two kinds of material. If a man has carnal relations with a woman who is a slave and has been designated for another man, but has not been redeemed or given her freedom, there shall be an indemnity. They shall not, however, be put to death. since she has not been freed. But he must bring to the entrance of the tent of meeting as his reparation offering to Hashem a ram of reparation offering. The priest shall make with expiation for him before Hashem for the sin that he committed, and the sin that he committed will be forgiven him.
Thank you, Richard. Let me invite Margot. Would you like to read starting at verse 23?
Carefully. When you enter the land and plant any tree for food, you shall regard its fruit as forbidden. 3 years it shall be forbidden for you not to be eaten. In the 4th year, all the fruit shall be set aside for jubilation before the Lord. And only in the 5th year may you use the fruit that it yields, to you. Excuse me, that it yields to you may be increased. I am the Lord your God. You shall not eat anything with blood. You shall not practice divination or soothsaying. You shall not round off the side growth of your head or destroy the side growth of your beard. You shall not make gashes in your flesh for the dead, or incise any marks on yourselves. I am the Lord your God.
Thank you, Margot. Let me invite Martin. Do you want to read this evening? If not, I'll go ahead and ask Mark Thompson. Mark Thompson, would you like to read starting at verse 29?
Thank you, Rabbi. Do not degrade your daughter and make her a harlot, lest the land fall into harlotry and the land be filled with depravity. You shall keep my Sabbaths and venerate my sanctuary. I am Adonai. Do not turn to ghosts and do not inquire of familiar spirits to be defiled by them. I, Adonai, am your God. You shall rise before the aged and show deference to the old. You shall fear your God. I am Adonai. When a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not wrong him. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens. You shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I, Adonai, am your God. You shall not falsify measures of length, weight, or capacity. You shall have an honest balance, honest weights, an honest ephah, and an honest hin. I, Adonai, am your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt. You shall faithfully observe all my laws and all my rules. I am Adonai.
Thank you so much. And Robert, would you like to continue there at the very start of chapter 20?
Yes, thank you. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Again thou shalt say to the children of Israel, Whosoever he be of the children of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn in Israel, that giveth any of his seed unto Molech, he shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. And I will set my face against that man, and will cut him off from among his people, because he hath given of his seed unto Molech, to defile my sanctuary, and to profane my holy name. And if the people of the land do any ways hide their eyes from the man, when he giveth of his seed unto Molech, and kill him not, then I will set my face against that man, and against his family, and will cut him off, and all that go a whoring after him, to commit whoredom with Molech from among their people. And the soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits, and after wizards, to go a whoring after them, I will even set my face against that soul, and will cut him off from among his people.
Thank you, Robert. And Justin, would you like to continue there at verse 7?
Thank you, Rabbi. You shall sanctify yourselves and be holy, for I am the Lord your God. And you shall observe my statutes and fulfill them. I am the Lord who sanctifies you. For any man who curses his father or his mother shall be put to death. He has cursed his father or his mother. His blood is upon himself. And a man who commits adultery with another man's wife, committing adultery with the wife of his fellow, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. And a man who lies with his father's wife has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon themselves. And a man who lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have committed a depravity. Their blood is upon themselves. And a man who lies with a male, as one would with a woman, would have them, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon themselves. And a man who takes a woman and her mother, it is evil counsel. They shall burn him and them in fire, and there shall be no evil counsel in your midst. And a man who lies with an animal shall surely be put to death, and you shall kill the animal. And a woman who comes close to any animal so that it will mate with her, you shall kill the woman and the animal. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon themselves.
Thank you so much. David and Susan, would you like to continue there at verse 17?
Thank you, Rabbi. Susan not able to read today.
Okay.
And a man who will take his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and see her nudity, and she will see his nudity, it is shame, and they will be cut off in the eyes of the children of their people. He has exposed his sister's nudity, he shall bear his crime. And a man who will lie with a menstruating woman and will expose her nudity, he's uncovered her source, and she has exposed the source of her blood. And the two of them will be cut off from among their people. And you shall not expose the nudity of your mother's sister or your father's sister, because one has thus uncovered his close relative. They shall bear their crime. And a man who will lie with his aunt, he has exposed his uncle's nudity. They shall bear their sin. They shall die childless. And a man who will take his brother's wife, it's an impurity. He's exposed his brother's nudity. They will be childless. You shall observe all my laws and all my judgments and do them. And the land to which I am bringing you to live in it will not vomit you out. And you shall not go by the laws of the nation that I am ejecting from in front of you, because they have done all of these things, and I am disgusted with them. And I have said to you, you shall possess their land, and I shall give it to you to possess it, a land flowing with milk and honey. I'm Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God, who has distinguished you from all the peoples.
Thank you so much. Let me invite, thank you, David. Let me invite Catherine, if you'd like to continue there at verse 25.
Thank you, Rabbi. Let's see, verse 25. So you shall set apart the clean beast from the unclean bird from the clean. You shall not draw abomination upon yourselves through beast or bird or anything with which the ground is alive, which I have set apart for you to treat as unclean. You shall be holy to me, for I, Adonai, am holy, and I have set you apart from other peoples to be mine. A man or a woman who has a ghost or a familiar spirit shall be put to death. They shall be pelted with stones, their blood guilt shall be upon them.
Thank you so much, and thank you, everyone. That's our entire Torah portion for the week. If you have a copy of the study sheet, I invite you to bring it out now. Here's at this table here is an extra copy if anyone needs it. So in preparation for this week's Torah portion, I renewed my reading of the English anthropologist Mary Douglas, who had some very interesting things to say about the Jewish Bible and about Leviticus in particular. And Mary Douglas had this very interesting notion that the Jewish Bible, as with most literature that was originally oral literature before it was finally written down, should not be read in a linear fashion, but should be read in a circular fashion. And because her notion was that as a storytelling, that these kinds of oral literatures had a way of having the ending not really be a conclusion, but a cycling back to the beginning itself. And this is what's called a chiastic structure or a ring structure, in which, as opposed to modern literature, which has a more linear read to it, where you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, in a ring structure, as with ancient oral literature, the ending really reflects what happened at the very beginning. And so it's interesting to think about that in terms of the way the Torah itself was originally written as a scroll, as a rolling document. And it also kind of emphasizes and enhances the notion of why we keep reading it in an ongoing cycle from Bereshit all the way through Deuteronomy, and then it just cycles back, as opposed to other faith communities where they will pick and choose what they want to read to fit a certain theme over the course of the weeks. In our tradition, we just start in Bereshit, go to Deuteronomy, and then we just roll it back over again. So I'm very intrigued by her notion about that and this particular body of wisdom should be read in a circular rather than a linear fashion. And then Mary Douglas said that in that type of a structure, that type of a ring structure, she said, the meaning is found not in the conclusion, the end point, as it is in linear literature, but is found in the middle. So here we are reading Torah, and the book of Leviticus is the middle of Torah, and the middle of the book of Leviticus is where we are this week in what's known as the Holiness Code, which we read here in Parshat Kedoshim. So now that's very intriguing. So that means, wow, there must be the meaning of all of Torah must be conveyed, according to Mary Douglas, within this material that we just read. And it must have something to do with Kedoshim, the name of this week's Torah portion, which means holiness. So now I'm intrigued. Well, I thought I knew what holiness was. I mean, I carry with me just some basic kind of unstudied notions of what it means to be holy, what holiness is. And in Hebrew, it's reflected by the word kadosh, which means to be set aside. And so we read a lot of material in this week's portion about setting things aside. Oh, so what's most holy is that which is set aside. So we're going to explore that notion a little bit, and I think maybe subvert at least my kind of assumption about holiness and setting things aside, and that being the kind of the highest form of spiritual life. So that's what we're going to explore by looking at what, in fact, comes pretty much in the middle of our portion, which is in the middle of the book of Leviticus, which is in the middle of all of Torah. So in number 1, I have these verses from our portion. When you enter the land and plant any tree for food, you shall regard its fruit as forbidden. 3 years it shall be forbidden for you not to be eaten. In the 4th year, all of its fruit shall be set aside, kadosh, for jubilation to Adonai. And in the 5th year, you may eat its fruit, that it may yield more richly to you its increase. I am Adonai, your God. So here we have a tree, and the fruit on the first 3 years is not to be eaten. Then the fruit that it produces in the 4th year is to be considered holy. That is, it's supposed to be set aside, and it's supposed to be eaten in a fashion that gives thanks to God for that particular produce. So that would make it seem that that 4th year, which is called holy, is in fact the most elevated yield of the tree. It's the holy yield of the tree. What's interesting is that in the Hasidic tradition, the understanding is it's not the highest and most valued produce from the tree. It's actually the 5th year. So we're going to explore that a little bit, and we're going to see, wow, maybe there's something more precious than holiness. Maybe there's some dimension beyond that which is holy, which has a higher value. So that's kind of a radical notion that I've been kind of exploring as I dealt with what's in the Torah and then dealt with looking into the Hasidic tradition. So what I did, I prepared a number 3 on the study sheet, part of the Hasidic tradition, building upon Kabbalah, has this notion that we have the universe consists of 4 dimensions, and as we are replications of the universe, each one of us has within us these 4 dimensions, and they are in order of ascension. Asiya, which is the physical dimension, the dimension of action and labor. Yetzirah, which is considered the formation dimension, and we would relate that in the human being to that of the level of emotions. And then we have Bria, the level of creation, and that we associate in the human being with the intellect. And then we have the 4th level, Atzilut, which is the level of emanation, that of spirituality, that of connection with the source of all life. So we would think, well, that would be considered the highest level one could reach. And that's the 4th level. Within this system that we're looking at, Kabbalah would say, actually, there's one more dimension beyond that, and that is called Keter, which means crown, and that is beyond. It is beyond even, it is infinity itself, if you will, the ever expansive sense of infinity. So within that little system that we're looking at now, what the purpose of going through these 4 levels is to reach some kind of refinement of self, some kind of transformation of self by going through all these dimensions that exist within us and within the universe. But it's also hinting that we do that in order to go beyond, if you will, holiness, because if holiness represents, and at least in the Hebrew construct, that of separation, then there's something that is keter, which is beyond separation, which is, I would call it, complete integration. So we go from beyond holiness, isolation, separation, distinction, to that of complete integration. So now we're going to play with this a little bit. And in my kind of wanderings through the studying about all this material this week, I don't know how I got there, but I got to a passage from the prophet Isaiah, which I just want to share with you. It's from Isaiah chapter 48, verse 8.
45.
Thank you, 45, verse 8. cause the heavens to drip from above, and let the skies pour down righteousness. Let the earth open, and let salvation and righteousness be fruitful. Let it cause them to grow together. I, Adonai, have created it. So I think when I stumbled upon this in my travels this week, I picked up on the word fruitful, because we were dealing here with the fruit of trees, and oh, maybe there's something to be learned here. And then the other thing that caught my attention was the first line here: cause the heavens to drip. In the Hebrew, that verb is in what we call the Hiphil form, which means it's a verb of causing something to happen. And it's not clear to me whether the subject of causing the heavens to drip from above are the heavens themselves, as if it should be translated as, "O heavens, cause yourselves to drip from above," or if the subject that's causing the heavens to drip is someone or something else. Okay, so I'm kind of pondering that. And then this notion about the skies are going to pour down righteousness, the earth below is going to open up, and let salvation and righteousness be fruitful, as if salvation and righteousness somehow are sprouting up from the earth. And then it says, and let it cause them to grow together. Salvation and righteousness now sprouting up from the earth and growing together. And the ultimate source of all of this is Adonai. But somehow I think earthbound beings are somehow also implicated in all of this happening. So I take all that, and I'm trying to now play with the notion that there's possibly a dimension that is beyond holiness, that it is some kind of fifth dimension, and that it has something to do with going beyond separation into something that is a complete expanse of this fruitfulness. The other aspect to bring into this is, and then we'll get into our painting, the other aspect of this is that during the days of the temple, the way the fourth year fruit was celebrated was it was really to be brought to the temple, and someone who was you would only be eating it in the confines of Jerusalem, and those who were eating it were supposed to be ritually pure. So where you could eat it and who could eat it was rather constrained. And within the Hasidic notion of all this material, the fifth year is a year when the fruit can be eaten by anyone, anywhere. So that kind of is coherent with my sense that we're going beyond distinction, separation, isolation, all of which is implicated in the Hebrew term of holiness, and we're going to something that is fully expansive, fully inclusive, breaking down of borders and boundaries, because it is food that can be eaten by anyone, anywhere. So having said that, we're going to look at a painting by Paul Cézanne, and Paul Cézanne had this notion, I have his quote here in number 5, "I will astonish Paris with an apple." And what he meant by that is he was going to enter into the heart of the art world at the time, which was Paris, and he was going to astound them by what he did with an apple. And so here we have this painting, The Basket of Apples, that he did. And you look at it and you say, oh, I can see what it is what's so astounding about that. There's a table, and on the table there's a basket, and in the basket are apples, and then there's some apples on the table, and there's a bottle of wine on the table, and there's a plate with some cookies or biscuits on the table. And so what's so astounding about that? as we spend time looking at the painting, we begin noticing certain things, such as I might not want to hire Paul Cézanne as a carpenter. Because if you look at the table, you see that somehow the back line of the table and the front line of the table don't really align. They're kind of out of sync with one another. And then we look at the bottle of wine, which seems to be tipping down towards the left. And then we have this basket of fruit, and the basket of fruit has apples which are spilled out, but the table also seems to be tilted to the left and forward slightly. And what's keeping those apples from falling off the table? And then we look at the plate of cookies, and we have several rows of cookies piled on top of one another, flat cookie, and then two cookies, then some more flat cookies on top of those, and then some more flat cookies on top of those, and then some more flat cookies on top of those. And then we get to the very top layer of cookies, and they're not flat like the others. There's a different perspective to them. They're either a perspective of looking at them from the side, so we get that dimension of them, or they're kind of standing up. So what we have,
How about the wine bottle that's sort of tilting and listing off to the side?
yeah, the wine bottle is tilting off to the side. So everything is off kilter and out of relationship with one another. So what Cézanne has done here, he has taken and exploded and explored different planes of existence occurring simultaneously. He has not accepted that there is only one perspective. So this is a direct challenge to the Renaissance notion of perspective, that there's only a single point of view that achieves the perspective that Renaissance painters did. Cézanne seems to be saying there are many different ways to be looking at any given scene. And what he has done here has created a direct challenge to a kind of a way of thinking that there's only one way of viewing reality. He's saying, no, there are many different ways of viewing any given moment. And what enables him to do this from kind of a thought process is that technologies had developed in the 19th century that radically changed how people experienced spatial and temporal existence. People would ride on a horseback, and they might be able to go for a while at somewhere between 5 and 10 miles an hour to cover ground, and they would see the scenery beside them shifting as they rode on their horse. And then by the 1830s, we have the steam engine, and the train was now able to move people at about 30 miles an hour across space. And that radically changed how people saw the capacity of what was spatially changing and how unstatic it was. And then about the same time, we have the invention of the camera. And what the camera does is the camera then frames what you're looking at and focuses your attention, and then kind of betrays the notion that there's something happening outside that framing. And so that begins to radically change how people look at things. So both in terms of time and space, that changes people's relationship to reality. So that's what Cézanne is kind of showing us in his painting here, is a radical way of seeing the world around us, which can be far more dynamic and far more capable of seeing different planes of existence at any given time. Of course, what Cézanne's art does, what it then engenders is what comes next, is the Cubist movement. The Cubists then go even further in showing us the multiple planes of any given face or object that one can see it at any one given moment. And so it shatters that flat, singular point of view. So I bring all that, trying to bring all that together, because what Cézanne did, he achieved our capacity to see the world in a very dynamic, multi-dimensional way, with something that was quite ordinary, an apple, or if you will, a basket of apples. And when we talk about going beyond 4 dimensions, that is in a sense what Cézanne has done. He says there are more dimensions than we've been told that there are. There are more dimensions in which to view the world than our great artistic masters handed off to us. And it also became a way of trying to break the hold of the remaining aristocracy and the controlling classes of insisting that there was only one truth and one way in which to see reality and one place that everyone had in this reality. And it becomes, as the Impressionists started, it seeks to shatter the hold that ruling classes had over both seeing reality, determining what was an appropriate subject. No longer were the only appropriate subjects to be the high elitist level of moral messages from religious literature or from grand historical events. The still life was considered the lowest form of art at the time. And Cézanne takes the lowest form of art and makes it an instrument of exploding, if you will, of liberating people from how they saw the world, and of the control of those who sought to determine what was true and what was not true, and what was right and what was wrong, what was noble and what was ignoble, what was high and what was low. And he takes something as the lowest form of art form, the still life, something as simple as a basket of apples, and says, the world belongs to you. It doesn't belong to those who seek to control you. So, and in a sense, that's what the Hasidic understanding of this, the 4 years and then the 5th year of the fruit is all about. It's about, we need to go beyond isolating ourselves. The isolation is a form of a stage of development, but it's not the end state. Holiness may not be the ultimate end state that we're supposed to achieve. It may be something beyond that. It may be something that we call full integration with all of existence. And with that, I'd love to see what you experienced, what you encountered during our reading. Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, I made comparisons with quantum mechanics and also with Einstein, that he viewed things. He came up with the 4 dimensions, time being the 4th dimension, length, width, and what is it, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And then time is the 4th.
And so in quantum physics, nothing is stabilized, right? I mean,
Yeah.
everything is
relativity.
Everything is in dynamic relationship with everything else. And we can actually, to the extent we begin to participate in the process of trying to understand it, we alter it merely by beginning to observe it. Yeah. So we become participants in changing reality.
Yeah, there's a famous American Jewish physicist, Michelson. He worked on the Michael Fluid experiment. 2 of them got a Nobel Prize. Light traveled at the same speed. They built the National Naval Research Lab. It's now Vice President of the US.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for bringing that up.
Wow.
Yeah, that is great. So, and then others, if you raise your hand, I'll call upon, let me call upon Robert and then Mark and then yeah.
Well, thank you again for a lovely evening and very stimulating. So, you know, I went as you were going through the questions or the points, I went back and looked at the fourth year and the fifth year and so forth. And in the material world, they say sleep, creep, leap for trees. So the first leap, when you plant one, I've seen this because we planted trees, they sleep, the next year they creep, the third year they leap. And after that, they go. And I thought to myself, you know, so I wonder, because I believe that there's cohesion, if you will, or confluence of reality in all these things. I thought of a young person. Those early years, those first few years, it's what about you? You assist that child, you don't expect a lot of fruit you're putting in, right? You're nurturing, sunshine, water, etc. And then in the fourth year, you can start beginning this, seeing this in adolescence and so forth. But when you reach maturity, the fifth year, if you will, maturity, which by the way, 5, if you take 5, that's how you get a star that represents the human form, a 5-pointed star, interestingly. In that fifth year, we have marriage, we have romance, we have marriage, we have independence, we have, you know, providing, we have the ability to give charity and so forth. So I thought that was interesting. Now, Isaiah, I have to tell you, you mentioned Isaiah and you get me right away, because in the Baha'i writings, he's considered the greatest of all the Hebrew prophets. I don't know about Judaism. And I have a special affinity. So I had to go back to see what verse 7 was. Okay, because you know, I've been doing this long enough, you have me figured out, right?
Yeah.
I form the light and create darkness. You know this already, but to make the point, I make peace and create evil. I am the Lord. I, the Lord, do all these things. And of course, this is from King James. Drop down, ye heavens from above, and let the skies pour down righteousness. Let the earth open, and let them bring forth salvation, and let righteousness spring up together. The Lord have created it. Okay, so here's my take. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. So there you have the context for free will, showing that God has created the ability for both. In nature, it doesn't make any difference. Animals sleep, wake up, it's no significance. But we have the ability for light and darkness within us. And in this first line, I see the creation of free will. Drop down, ye heavens. What are the heavens? The heavens are that which is lofty. The revelation that poured down from Moses, and for me, from Baha'u'llah as well, that's the heaven of revelation and religion. Drop down, ye heavens from above, and let the skies, okay, bounty of God, pour down righteousness. In other words, in our hearts, let the earth open up. Pour down righteousness, let the earth open up. The earth of the human heart, the garden of the heart. Because what receives the rain? It's the soil. Well, spiritually, what's the soil? It's the heart, the soul. From above, and let the earth open up, and let them bring forth salvation. In other words, we can choose the light or the darkness. We can choose peace, we can create evil. Let the earth open up and let them bring forth salvation, not for themselves, but for everyone, right? And let righteousness spring up together, and that's community. And that is unity. So thank you for Isaiah, and always thank you for Thursday Torah. I've been doing this long enough that I'm comfortable opening up my heart. And so, you know, that's it. I get very excited about these things because I happen to love the spiritual.
And I get very excited when you talk too.
We're grateful for your excitement. And I want to share something back to you about Isaiah. So the verse that you read, you took us back to verse 7 from chapter 45, and there's that line, I make peace and create evil. And that verse is incorporated into the daily prayer service and the Jewish daily prayer service. But the rabbis, when they looked at that, they said, are people going to understand what that means to say, I make peace and create evil? That's so they changed it to, and I create everything. They rewrote it. They rewrote it. But I appreciate, you're bringing us back to the original language and the notion that what that's talking about is that all of those possibilities exist within us as well, as you said, and that we have the capacity to make those choices. And that's where righteousness and salvation will come from, is when we make the choices that create a more cohesive, coherent, healing world. So thank you so much for bringing all that material, and thank you so much. Let me call upon Mark Thompson. Go ahead.
Thanks, Rabbi. I was going to say something else, but now I'm intrigued by your last comment, and I'm curious to know why it is that the rabbis did make that change from the evil to everything, if you happen to know.
I think it's because they thought it was just so utterly provocative and problematic for that they thought it would be problematic for most people to say, what, God is a source of evil? That would be just too difficult to try and work through and understand.
And yet they kept goodness in there. So it's goodness in everything, or good and evil. Evil was eliminated. Everything was put in its place, but goodness was retained.
Yeah.
So if everything consumes everything, then it should have been just everything.
Yeah. But it is.
Anyway, that wasn't going to be my point.
Go ahead.
I'm really interested in this notion of isolation, and I'm thinking back to our Seder. We had a really interesting Seder this year. We had, first of all, probably about 27 people, the largest we've ever had. And we decided to have an abbreviated Seder with the Haggadah, but instead we decided to have a discussion. And the discussion was about what does it mean to be Jewish now, in the light of everything that's going on in our world. And someone brought up this notion that in some ways Jews have isolated themselves, which has caused some of the problems that we are currently experiencing. And so when you were talking about this movement from isolation to a broader sense of reality, it just makes me wonder whether that's something that we as Jews need to continue to work on.
So you bring up the Seder. I'm so glad you had this. Sounds like you had a very rich conversation around your table. And what greater way to celebrate the holiday of freedom than to have that kind of serious conversation. And you also got me to thinking about the number 4 is very prevalent in the service, in the Haggadah and the Seder service, because you've got the 4 cups of wine, you've got the 4 questions, you've got the 4 sons, you've got 4 rabbis who get involved in a discussion and a problem, right? And so you've got the number 4, and so we went through here this number 4. Number 4 seems pretty critical, but what's interesting is that the Seder really reaches its conclusion when we say next year in Jerusalem, meaning that the story isn't over, meaning that there is yet a higher dimension that we have the capacity to achieve. So I just throw that out there. So I'm so glad that you had that discussion. Thank you. Thank you for contributing to a wonderful Passover for over 24 people. That's great. Thank you. Let me call upon Catherine, then I'll call upon Richard here, and then Jay. Yeah, so Catherine, please.
Yeah. I may be stating the obvious, but it seems to me that this Parshat and the painting is about margins. In the Parshat, we have sort of margins both being created through prohibitions and who's going to be cut off or not cut off from the group. But we also have this kind of respect for people on the margins, such as the elderly and the stranger, as long as they are keeping things holy, it is okay to welcome them within the midst. And we have these sort of stray apples in the painting that we don't know what to do with. In other words, did the apples fall out of the basket? Are they contemplating putting them in the basket? How far can they stray from the basket without falling off the table? So it's got us thinking about that.
You know, and it's lovely. We've got this, I didn't mention the tablecloth. We have this tablecloth on the table, but the tablecloth is really, its trajectory, it seems to be downward, right? And so it is that bit of that gravity that's pulling the apples, if you will, as well as our perspective, our vision of looking at it is also very aware of the tendency of everything to spill off the table. And yet everything is there. There's a great deal of tension in this painting, I feel. Yeah. So and you've hit upon the notion that we've discussed previously about how much Leviticus really is focused on borders and separations and boundaries and things like that, which you talked about. And you know, if one lived that kind of a boundaried existence with the normative rules and everything, I think one could create hopefully a moral society. There's something hidden, I think, in this text, which is what we were exploring tonight, that says yet there's a dimension in beyond that. And that's a dimension beyond, if you will, all those definitions and boundaries and borders. There's something that is, I use the word, a level of complete integration. And I think that's also what Cézanne is playing with here, that yes, we have a framework for a table, and we have a posture that a bottle should be when it's sitting on a table. But it's also, he's saying, you can play with those perspectives, and you can play with those normative rules about gravity and those normal rules about perspective and relationship of one end of a table to another. And you can achieve something that's not chaos. You can achieve something that's beauty. So let me call upon Richard, then Anna, and David. So go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Rabbi. I like what you said about another level than creating a just society. I look at this picture and it calls out to me, all these apples, which might be from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and we're not to eat them anyway. And they're about ready to tumble forward. They're all evil. And this falling down makes me want to rush in there and grab that tablecloth.
Of course you do.
And just talk about evil. And where did it come from? Well, God made it here. He did it. Says so. Rabbi didn't like to say it out front because it makes unpleasant talk. So it's just everything, and that includes evil, by the way. And I noticed my note from early on, it was about the young woman who engages in non-marital sex with a man at his dominion. And she gets burned. She participated in evil. And what happened last week with Azazel, the harbinger of evil in the world? She got freed. She didn't get burned up. She got sent into the world. And that's the one thing we have going for us, to get to that next level where we treat one another as ourself, where we're all united as one being. And this business of what we have as life is just another womb. Weisenthaler's book on the Kaddish, he points out, it goes through everything that's ever been written about the Kaddish and all the rituals in every shtetl in the world. And at one page, the end of one page, he's saying, Jews in Gehenna, they don't have to work on Sabbath. They get the day off. No bacon bagels in heaven, in hell. They get the day off. And I'm thinking, as I turn the page, where do they go? And I turn the page, and Weisenthaler says, well, heaven and hell share space. And if you want proof of that, go open your front door. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you, Richard. And call upon Anna,
Deal with it.
and then I'm going to call upon David and Jay. Go ahead, Anna.
Well, this, referring back to the picture and the mixed multitude, boundaries, borders, margins coming out of Egypt. It looks very much to me, now I do have cataracts and this is a small little picture, but it looks like the right-hand piece of fruit is perhaps more pear-shaped than apple-ish. And it looks to me like the apples are different varieties, like someone maybe took the basket to the orchard and walked through and picked from different trees to assemble this all. Does it, you know what I mean? There are green ones, red ones, there's yellow and red ones, there's one shape and another shape. They're kind of clustered together there, but that's a whole community of fruit.
Community of fruit. Thank you.
Go.
Thank you. And let me call upon David and Jay. Go ahead, David and Jay. Yeah, you need to unmute David.
I was jumping around between my PDF of the picture blown up. I needed to come back. I have a list of things that puzzle me about Torah. And among those things are leavening and blood. But one of those things, let me back up to the beginning and say, I love the way Robert thanks everyone when he starts his comments.
Don't you think
And I want to get in that habit myself. And I want to thank everyone here for their brain enlarging comments for me. So everyone that's spoken today, I'm very grateful to. So thank you. And I'm going to throw something out there that is not in the same high class, but it's one of the things is uncircumcised versus circumcised. And in my translation, which is Richard Elliott Friedman's, of your first entry on the sheet, which says, when you enter the land and plant any tree for food, you shall regard its fruit as forbidden. The 3 years it shall be forbidden to you and not to be eaten. According to Friedman, and I presume that means that the more accurate or literal translation is the word that's used, that your tree shall remain uncircumcised. The top of your tree shall remain uncircumcised. That's the end of my comment. I love mysteries, and this adds to my uncircumcised mystery, but maybe it'll help me a little bit next time I think about Moses, to think of trees, the very tops not being cut so that later they can fruit.
So one way to think about that, yes, that is the literal translation that's used there, the uncircumcised. And one way to think about that is what is uncircumcised has yet to enter into the covenant, has yet to enter into a pact. And the notion of a cutting was used, as we understand it, in ancient societies to symbolize and represent some kind of pact that has been reached between two sovereign forces, two sovereign beings. And then that gets passed on to, that's the way we, the Israelite people, we're going to enact a cutting of the male child as a way to ritualize entering into a pact with the sovereign, with another sovereign self. And so maybe there's something about these apples until they reach that point at which they are then become offered by the one who grew it to the one who's the source of all that life and giving thanks for it. That's the act of entering into some kind of covenantal relationship between the grower and the ultimate force that's responsible for its existence. That's just one thought I've got. Let me call upon. Thank you, David, for always for your quandaries and your questions. And so thank you, because there's great wisdom in all of that. So let me call upon Jay and then Margot. Go ahead, Jay.
The popular youth, especially version of Oseh Shalom, is may the one who brings peace bring peace down, bring peace down. Is that related to what you were saying about Isaiah? May the one who brings peace bring peace down. In other words, that's what struck me, because I just heard that last Shabbat. The second thing is that I had the honor, the privilege during my real estate law career of working with commercial nurseryists, commercial nurseries. Unbeknownst to the public, I don't know if it's up there. It's at least within the top 5. And California is the largest agricultural state in the world. But it used to be 2, but now it's maybe down. Nursery stock is one of the largest exports of the state of California. So I'm looking at the trees, and everybody loves to landscape and go to the nursery. Oh, we're planting all these things. Well, I learned a long time ago, even before my experience with these nurseryists as a child, if I look at a peach tree that's at the nursery or at the farmer's market, beautiful on Sunday or something, and it's flowering, I ask him, I look at him and I say, 3 years or 4? And he goes, 4. And I look at a shrub and I say, 2 years or 3. These things don't just happen. They don't just fall and boom, like plastic foliage. You walk into a plastic foliage shop or Michael's, and no, there is an order, there is a progression. And I loved what someone said. I think it was you, Robert, about the first year, the second year, and the third year. And whenever I see a landscape project being done, I always look and say, does anyone realize that date palm, and you see them all over, that date palm grew out in a grove near the Salton Sea for 10 or 15 years before they carefully uprooted it and moved it to Long Beach and put it in. So we make a pretty hodgepodge job of it. Hashem is saying, please, please understand, get your act together and keep it together. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that warmed a lot of hearts. I know, to bring in all that acknowledgement about the raising of trees, the transplanting of trees, and there's a lot that we could say about the difference between the exotic and the native that I think would have a lot of interest. So so thank you so much for
Do you have about 4 hours?
Right. It's very rich what you shared. Thank you so much. Let me call upon Margot. Go ahead and unmute Margot and share with us. Yeah, you need to unmute. There you go.
Is that good?
Yes, that's good.
I'll try and be succinct. You know what we didn't discuss? Delayed expectation. And think about it. You have to delay for when you can eat from the tree. And if we go all through this portion, if people delay expectation, they won't do all the things that they're prohibited from doing. So I think delayed expectation also comes into this.
So Margot, you actually,
To bloom, waiting for the 4th year. That's a long time to wait. You don't have intercourse with all the people they mentioned. You don't do that. You delay expectation till you get to the right person. So I think delayed expectation is something in this.
Margot, you actually just channeled the great 11th century scholar Rashi.
Oh,
That's it. That was exactly his point. He says you go through these years of restraint, and at the conclusion of these years of restraint, you have more bounty than you could have expected. And so thank you for channeling Rashi. We're glad that you brought him.
my pleasure.
Right, you brought him to the table. My friends, what a rich discussion this has been from so many different perspectives, so many different points of view. And in fact, in a way is reflective of what Cézanne's painting is all about. The capacity that in any one scene, there are more planes of existence and more dimensions than we might initially be sensitive to. And so that we should expand our vision to see all these different points of view and planes of existence that are existing at any one time. And the title of this week's study session, The Most Precious Fruit, I just want to say that the most precious fruit in that Hasidic understanding is, again, that which can be eaten anywhere by anyone. That question of sharing, that question of generosity of heart, how do we get there? How do we become those kinds of human beings? And so that also goes back to these four dimensions that I was sharing with you from Kabbalah, which is that you need to experience fully all these aspects of oneself, one's physical self, one's emotional self, one's intellectual self, one's spiritual self. And when you have explored all of them and developed all of them and learned from them, then you reach this new dimension, which is full of generosity of heart, which is welcoming, which has a radical sense of welcome and embrace. And we reach that realm that I call full integration with all of creation and all of existence. And that would make this world such a much better place. I'm so grateful that to be on that path with you and working through these different dimensions with you and sharing them. To me, you are all most precious fruit. So thank you all so much. God bless you all. I look forward to our next gathering. Be well.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So much.
Bless you all.